Hey, g'day. Uh, this Orange Pi Zero is now my favorite device for projects. However, I want to be able to code on the Orange Pi when I'm hanging out at Starbucks or even out in the park using my cell phone as a hotspot like I am at the moment. This got complicated. I can connect my laptop to a hotspot easy enough, but it's much more involved to get an Orange Pi to connect to the same network and be able to SSH to it from my laptop. So this video I show what I did to get this working so I can use my laptop and development tools like SSH and VsCode from my laptop and code on an Orange Pi. By the way, the same approach works for a Raspberry Pi on other network and other network connected processors.
So when I'm at home, just using my normal desktop, this is how I normally connect to something like an Orange Pi or a Raspberry Pi that's running Linux. So I use Visual Studio Code, and I'm using the Remote Explorer, which is an extension. I'm using Remote SSH extension here to be able to connect through SSH and use Visual Studio Code on whatever I'm connected to through SSH. So let's go back up here, and so I'll open a remote window. Connect to host, and the host I want to connect to is this kiwi-pi.home, which is the host name on my little Orange Pi that I have at home to connect to. So let's select that. So it opens up a new window. Needs a password. So this is just my normal SSH password. So we're all connected in. Let me open up a folder, this RTM folder is the one I want to connect to. Again, it's asking for the password. And there I am connected into kiwi.pi, and I've got my terminal going so I can do things like ls, see what files are in my home Pi directory. I can open up the files out on the device and edit them and run them. So that, with Visual Studio Code and Remote Explorer, makes working on something like a Raspberry Pi or an Orange Pi pretty easy, but the key is you need to be able to have SSH connectivity to it. So I don't always want to sit at home and do the coding, so if I'm going out to a coffee shop or Starbucks, or even if I'm connecting through my iPhone just on a hotspot, then if I'm just using my PC, then it's fairly straightforward. I just use Wi-Fi to connect into the hotspot or the connection at the coffee shop. Where it gets tougher is where I also want the Orange Pi to connect into the same network so I can talk to it over SSH. And kind of the challenges there are the Orange Pi that I'm using is headless, so I don't have a screen and a keyboard to use with it. So just doing the sign in for a lot of connections where you have to put in the SSID or a password, or once you connect in, if it's something like a coffee shop or an airport, you usually have to put more details in. I can't do it on the Orange Pi unless I have a keyboard and a screen to see what I'm doing on. Even if I do get connected in, a lot of times guest networks, they don't allow one device to see another device on the same network, just for security. So when you're at the airport, you don't want to be able to scan and see other people's devices on the same network as you or do things to them. So usually they don't allow traffic to flow within the guest network between two devices. So again, for SSH, it means my laptop here can't connect to or even see where the Orange Pi is. Even if I could get connected, usually the connections to public networks are through DHCP, so they're assigned some random IP address in that subnet, and unless I have a way of scanning that subnet to find the address or know what that the address of the device is, again, it can't be discovered. And the other thing that gets complicated is for VsCode, every time you set up a remote connection, it expects to connect to the same either hostname or IP address. So it can be more complicated if you have to reconnect your session on your VsCode session where the device's IP address has changed. You usually got to set up a whole new connection. So the solution for me, I'm using a PC, so I can use Windows Internet connection sharing to allow devices to have their own little network that is seen by my PC. So just the diagram here sort of shows what it looks like, but I'll go through the setup procedure. So on my laptop, first I connect up to the point of connection, either the Wi-Fi at the coffee shop or hotspot on my phone, and then I also plug in a USB dongle that has a additional USB outlets on it for power and an Ethernet jack on it, and those I connect to the Orange Pi Zero. So USB just to power the Orange Pi Zero, and then Ethernet to connect to the networking on the Orange Pi Zero. And I'll show you setting up the internet connection sharing, but what it does is set up a network on 192.168.137.0 subnet. It has a DNS name of mshome.net for devices on there. And once you've done that, you'll be able to SSH and see the Orange Pi on that new network. So let's have a look at that actually being set up. Okay, this shows you me actually connecting up. So in this case, I was at a Wholefoods drinking my coffee. So you see I've connected through Wi-Fi to the Wholefoods network. If I do an ARPA, you see the addresses I'm on. I can do things like ipconfig and see what the network looks like that I'm on for the Wi-Fi. So at the moment I haven't connected the Orange Pi. So if I go down to view my network status and select change adapter options, I can see that I've got an active connection going through Wi-Fi, which is in this case the Wholefoods connection, but I haven't got any other connection. Now I just plugged in the USB dongle with the Orange Pi attached, and you see Ethernet 2 started showing up. But I still don't see any additional networks. It just sees the actual physical adapter. Now let's fire up internet connections sharing. So I'll go into the Wi-Fi adapter, go into properties, go to the second tab for sharing, turn on sharing, and select the Ethernet 2 as the adapter I want to share with. So that's got the Orange Pi on it. Click on OK. Now if I do an ARP, I see there's a new device showing on that network, 137 network, which is 213. Now let's check out whether that's the Orange Pi. So I'm going to do an nslookup, and the Orange Pi host name is mobile-pi, and then I'm going to look on the mshome.net domain. So that didn't work. Where it's looking for DNS names on strange networks, you actually have to put the DNS server IP in. So the DNS server IP for that subnet is on 192.168.137.1. So let's try that. And now we see it. It's finding that that orange Pi, and it's got address of .213. So let's just test that we can SSH to that orange Pi. Let's make sure we've got all the connectivity we want. So I'll do SSH Pi at, and I'll put in the IP address, but I could use the mobile Pi host name as well. So that's encouraging. It's asking me for a password. I'll put the orange Pi password in for the Pi user code, and we see we're connected to the orange Pi. So the last thing I wanted to test out is that VsCode still works connecting there. So I'm trying to connect to the mobile Pi at .mshome.net. I'd already connected to it, so it's in my list of remote connections that are available, so it just went in there by default. Otherwise you can open up the host manually. So it asks for the password for SSH. It's connecting in, and looks like we're seeing the normal things from VsCode. It's connected into the orange Pi even while I'm sitting at home, Wholefoods. And I can open up a terminal and do Linux terminal stuff here as well, like an ls. So everything's working, and then everything else VsCode does works as well. So I've got add-ins for Docker interpretation, Python interpretation. That all looks good. So just look at how you set up a host name on an Orange Pi or a Raspberry Pi. So I'm doing SSH manually to the Kiwi Pi. Signing in. Now I'm going to change up to SU because I'm going to be doing root type things. Now I'm going to go change up to etc folder, and let's do a nano on host name file. And you see in here, this is where the Kiwi Pi host name got defined for this particular orange Pi. So let's exit out of here. The other useful network file on the orange Pi, and I'm using Ambien, is down in the network manager, system connections folder. There's a file called wired connection, so let's do a nano on that just so we can see what's in it. So this is how you set up different connections, at least in Ambien, and in this IPv4 is where you set the connection method. At the moment I've got method equals auto, which means it'll use DHCP, so it doesn't have any other information. But you could also set up your orange Pi with a static address in the 192.168.137 subnet, in which case you'd say manual method and you'd put in the parameters for setting a manual static address. The important thing with Windows Internet connection sharing is that it has to have a gateway of 192.168.137.1, and a DNS server is set up as 192.168.137.1 as well, and then you just give it an IP address in that range. Finally, I'll just show you how I close down a section when I've been connected. So first I do a sudo shutdown now just to stop the orange Pi and close all the files neatly. So I was checking and the Orange Pi turned itself off. And now I can close down the network sharing. So I'm going to go to my adapters. And you can see here now that the Ethernet 2 shows it's disconnected because the Orange Pi isn't on there anymore. And I just go to sharing again and turn off the sharing. Now I can pull the USB Ethernet connector out of the laptop, so Ethernet 2 disappears. I've just got Wi-Fi going, and now I can just do a normal shutdown on my laptop, ready to go the next time. So that's about it. So that turned out to be a reliable method of getting things like Orange Pis connected when I'm out at Starbucks or somewhere else. I'm fairly happy with that. There may be a similar sort of thing to internet connection sharing on Macs, but I don't really know. But that seems to be the method that works pretty well.